If every revolution is about the overturning of the old regime, certainly by the late 70s, early 80s, you see that with the sexual revolution.
It's an electric vibrator scientifically designed to
indulge your sexual pleasures and fantasies.
It was a gift that people had won. In other words, it was a sexual revolution. They won, and now we live like that.
Let the games begin.
Why not meet where all the swingers meet? The underground
Maharaja Lounge, which swings 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Clubs sprang up to cater to every sexual interest. They were really set up for anything goes kind of sex, where you had harnesses and buckets of Crisco, and you could just go at it for hours.
And you better get your ass down here right now.
Before AIDS happened, every night when you walked home, you had sex with someone. I mean, that's amazing to imagine, but it really was like that.
It was a game that was now going to be played. It was about sexual freedom, but it was also about serious business.
Whenever I get some money, I buy Calvins.
Tune in to pornography in the privacy of your home? Well, millions of people are doing it on X-rated videotape cassettes.
It reached a peak of such sexual lunacy that no one alive today will ever see that again in their lifetime.
Might as well face it, you're addicted to love.
By the late 1970s, you see the sexual revolution peaking in disco culture and how that reflects the abandon of the times.
Disco was the music of sex.
People would dance all night and then, go home and
Where people wanted to have sex, they were going to have sex. We would go around to Xenon, Studio 54, the two largest discotheques of that era.
Society columnists adore Studio 54 for the personalities it attracts. But the real star are the music, the lights, and the dance floor, where practically anything goes.
A typical night at Studio 54, I saw many people having sex in full view of other people.
You were going up to the VIP room, there was a lot of sex going on up there. I'd had sex up there many times.
It was a very permissive environment. Drugs everywhere.
Cocaine was like the candy and flowers of that era, and everybody was on Quaaludes.
Quaaludes, in addition to relaxing your muscles, completely relaxed all inhibitions.
work like a sexual can opener, sort of. You would get somebody higher than they'd ever been before and take advantage of it.
That's why certain people call them leg spreaders. And the whole pharmacopoeia of hedonism at that time was about sexuality.
All the people that I hung with were super heterosexual, but we always went to the gay clubs to hear the newest music. It was the best DJs, the most underground stuff.
Disco, which had been a very gay thing, became a gigantic commercial force in music.
The first time I heard the Village People, I went over to the DJ and said, wow, what was that?
The funny thing about the Village People was it was all tongue-in-cheek.
Like kids, when you were growing up, everybody wanted to be a cowboy or in the army. That's sort of what Village People was about.
When they sang YMCA, what they meant was, let's go to the YMCA and get laid. But what the audience heard was, let's go have a good time at the YMCA. You could look at it either way, so they couldn't get in trouble.
And it felt like, wow, the gay rights movement, they take it into a whole nother level. It's invading pop culture.
YMCA, and it's all sign language and stuff, and they have no clue as to what the thing really was about.
At the same time, of course, you had sex clubs opening all over the place.
There were lots of swing clubs, orgies, went to places like Plato's Retreat.
Plato's Retreat was a swingers club. You'd pay a certain amount of money, and there were hot tubs and swimming pools.
Very similar to Studio 54, except a naked version with lots of mattresses and rooms for people to do whatever they wanted.
The place was like Sodom and Gomorrah, just a little den of debauchery.
It's called a freak. They're doing it not today. Allow us. We'll show you the way.
Swinging in the 60s was suburban swinging. You know, these key parties, they called them. What Plato's did was it created an emporium for it. And now there was big money to be made.
Now here we are in the beautiful mat room of Plato's Retreat, the most famous place in the world, probably.
It was owned by this guy named Larry Levinson, who is described as not being the smartest guy in the world.
It's a beautiful sight to watch 30 couples all naked, touching, caressing, and making love.
He was, like a cab driver kind of guy, and he was the host of this fancy swing club.
Hi, swingers. We're Larry and Mary, co-owners of Plato's Retreat.
Regarded himself as the king of swing, so he had a throne.
Is he active at his own club?
Of course. He line them up and he gives them numbers.
Time magazine reported that 6,000 people a month were going through that place.
We have a song out, Plato's Retreat, that's #1 in the country right now.
There was often entertainment, strippers, or some kind of sexual skits.
7 to 9 p.m. We have male strippers here for ladies only. At 9 p.m. we reopen our doors for ladies mud wrestling.
We came out and we started wrestling around and rolling around and cutting each other's clothes off with knives. And, it was very sexy and very fun.
All excited. Let's all do the freak and play on the streets.
Lots of porn stars and suburban people. It was an incredible mix of people.
Have you seen Bonnie make love to another man?
Yes, I did.
How did you feel the first time?
My mom said it's wrong. My dad said it's wrong. My rabbi said it's wrong. But I think it's right.
As you see, this young lady seems to be enjoying herself immensely, and all the couples will be also starting tonight.
It was not the most luxurious place. One was not tempted to go in the hot tub, which had a kind of film over it. They were serving bologna and not beluga.
You get a meal that's fantastic. You get any bar mitzvah, a whole smorgasbord.
I remember enjoying the food the most. It always seemed clean to me, the buffet. I mean, you might have someone's balls, dipping into the chopped liver now and then.
I'm not going to eat anything at that buffet at all.
I don't think there's anything worse than thinking about middle-class, overweight people having sex. And that's what Plato's Retreat was always to me.
It seemed to be filled with dentists from New Jersey with zits on their backs. It was not my idea of a Roman orgy.
There was a moment at Plato's Retreat where a woman took on 86 men.
You have this porn star, Tara Alexander, who decides she's going to break the Guinness Book of World Records for how many men she can sleep with.
I'm looking for a kiss.
I've gotten tired just watching her. I want to find out how she feels. How do you feel?
Tired? Still not completely satisfied, though.
The spermathon, as outrageous as it seemed, was only something that was indicative of a trend in the sexual revolution. Whatever was happening could be pushed more.
Do you feel like you fulfilled your fantasy?
No, I wanted more.
The thing that happens in the 70s is the merchants of the sexual revolution become the ones who are going to push the envelope. You really see it in the competition between the publishers of skin mags.
Playboy was going very strong through the 60s and 70s. There were 5 million men who bought it every month. It sold about 5 million copies.
The market is getting larger, but our percentage share of it is smaller.
Playboy was the most imitated magazine in America and the world. Yes, there were about 50 imitations.
The newsstands are filled with Playboy imitators who are willing to be more blatant, more aggressively erotic.
In order for them to get an audience, they had to go a little down market and get a little dirtier with things.
There is certainly a lot that's being published today that makes Playboy look rather establishment.
Hefner, when he started Playboy magazine, it was mostly topless stuff, cheesecake photos, no bottomless business, no showing of private parts and the rest. Guccione took it lower.
I'm Bob Guccione, editor and publisher of Penthouse magazine.
Guccione does a lot of his own photography.
Same shot again, right?
Leaving no part of the female anatomy hidden.
Shake your hair up a little bit.
Medical textbooks show no more.
Things were changing. In Penthouse, there's now pubic hair.
Full frontal nudity became standard at Penthouse 4 years ago, and Playboy followed in 3 months.
The magazine is more permissive than it was, both in graphics and in text than it was, let's say, 3 or 4 years ago.
Penthouse opened the Pandora's box. Then Playboy followed suit, and Hustler opened it even wider and had what they called showing pink.
Larry Flint's Hustler is probably the most uncompromising porno magazine yet. Enough to make Hugh Hefner wince.
Larry took Hugh Hefner to an OBGYN area.
The path was clear in terms of where we were going and who we were appealing to.
Hustler is nothing more than a mirror that reflects the private fantasies of the individual readers. It's as commonplace in America as apple pie.
He and Bob Guccione and some of the others fed the drive to the bottom.
Playboy seemed to be, I don't know, do I want to say more elegant? Hustler was just vulgar to the extreme.
This particular cover of Hustler showed a woman's legs, and the rest of her had been fed into a meat grinder.
Does she walk? Does she talk? Does she come complete?
And the caption was, "We will no longer hang up women like pieces of meat."
You'll see that there's the FDA stamp of approval in the lower right-hand corner. Women are literally made into pieces of meat. The spread inside shows a woman spread with ketchup. It looks like blood, there's a kind of implicit violence.
At one point, porn had seemed like a means of liberating people, of transforming sexual attitudes. But by the late 70s, there was a campaign to eliminate pornography from the culture, from both the far left and the far right.
We have to do battle now with pornography.
For women in the women's movement, porn really represented a symptom of an unhealthy society.
Pornography is the sexualized subordination of women.
One of the prominent factions of the anti-porn feminist movement was this group, Women Against Pornography. So they think, okay, we're going to persuade people where the religious right has always failed, that porn is bad. And they decided, they made this conscious choice that they were going to set up their offices right in the middle of Times Square.
Times Square was, a whole area of pornographic films, of prostitution, of drugs.
That was the center of the porn industry, and we said that's where we're going to have our office.
Their trademark tactic is they have these tours.
A few times a week where we took people around to see what real life porn looked like.
They'll have a bunch of nuns or a group of high school students come and they'll speechify about how it's bad.
We'll see people, brand new people. There's something to see.
Feminists giving a tour to a ladies' auxiliary group up into showroom where there are big gaping, and bazooms and John Holmes going up and stuff.
Oh, isn't it wild?
And they just were bug-eyed.
Women touring Times Square flesh palaces to mobilize support for a conference and mass march against pornography.
The march was being led by Gloria Steinem, Bella Abzug, and 5,000 angry feminists.
We were marching through the streets of Times Square, all of us by the thousands, pointing at the theater and saying, shame, shame, shame.
Thousands of women waving their banners in their fists. They had placards, down with porn, porn kills. There were some very angry girls in there.
You remain a committed feminist, and you're back to speak out against pornography.
What really arrested my attention were the feminists who came in to remind the mothers in my audience that these naked pictures objectified women.
The images go way beyond the old-style Playboy. It gets into images of women being bound, raped, tortured, mutilated, even murdered in the name of sexual stimulation and pleasure.
The explosion of softcore, sexually explicit, often violent pictures into everyday life infuriates feminists.
The idea that women like to be beaten, the idea that that is sexy, it's not just sleazy bookstores, it's not just Hustler magazine, it's seeped into the whole culture.
You really started to see it with the Rolling Stones' Black and Blue,
which is the Rolling Stones billboard on Sunset Boulevard.
There's a huge feminist reaction to that.
If you'll notice, there's a woman there. She's very glamorized. There are bruises on the inside of her legs. She's bound with rope, and she's saying, the caption says, "I'm black and blue from the Rolling Stones," and I love it.
That sort of crossed a strange boundary. If you'd had Mick tied up and beaten by a dominatrix, that would have been okay. But this sort of defenseless woman tied up like that, it really made people cringe.
The terrible thing about it is that a lot of men get to believe that whatever they do to us, including the violent stuff, is really what we secretly want.
That's what was happening in the mainstream media and advertising more and more. And I think it played directly into the hands of people who were going to point to the sexual revolution and say, this has gone too far.
By the late 70s, you see a confusion about sexuality and, in many ways, a real backlash against the sexual liberalism of the 60s and the early 70s.
When you talk about a sexual revolution, you're really talking about a nuclear strike on the home and on relationships.
The end result is great, great damage to the family in America, which is already hurting at 40% divorce rate.
We know now that divorce is increasing in epidemic proportions, and it seems to be contagious. Women are changing their own roles, and men are having trouble coping with that. Divorce is changing the way we live today and the way we will live tomorrow.
I think that people got crazy from all of the choices that were suddenly available to them. They just became unwilling to languish in a marriage in which they had become sexually bored, if not celibate. And now you can be divorced for irreconcilable differences, which can mean anything, and which oftentimes did mean bad sex in the marriage.
Sexual dysfunction will be such a great cause for this divorce that it more than equals all the other causes.
I wish that we could stop this divorce.
Divorce was a huge story, and it was everywhere in the popular culture as well. You know, television was replete with divorce. It was everywhere. And suddenly you had a whole slew of films that just mirrored the situation back. Kramer versus Kramer told the story of a woman who felt neglected by a husband, and she needs to leave the marriage to find herself. And the Dustin Hoffman character, Ted, finds himself really deserted by his wife. And there's this famous scene in the beginning where Meryl Streep leaves him. It reflected a social and cultural phenomenon that had been gathering force for a decade.
Guys, eat.
Ted, I'm leaving you. Ted, keys. Here are my keys. Here's my American Express card. Here's my Bloomingdale's credit card. Here's my checkbook.
Social conservatives said marriage should be sacred. It's the basis of not only the family, but the health of the whole society.
The
American people want to return to traditional values, a return to basics, to the family.
The counter-revolution is stepping up efforts aimed at reversing what many see as this country's slide into immorality.
A lot of religious conservatives saw the things that they cared deeply about being undermined, and they felt that their values were being trashed, and they were angry about it.
Christians for Reagan, the nation's largest Christian political action committee in Washington, D.C., has launched a massive campaign to mobilize 40 million Christian voters.
Reagan became one in whom many religious conservatives put their faith.
The Christian right became very much involved in politics and played a major part in getting Reagan and the Republicans into office in the beginning of the 1980s.
We have state legislatures, state governments, both houses of Congress, and a president committed to all the principles that a majority of moral Americans want.
We consider pornography to be a public problem, and we feel it is an issue that demands a second look.
If the sexual revolution had really come to pass, how would we have wound up with Reagan and Bush? The fear of the sexual revolution was bigger than the revolution itself. And the pendulum swung back very hard, I think.
This medical mobile unit is equipped with private screening areas. On-site testing and treatment for syphilis and gonorrhea will be given from 3 to 9 p.m.
Today, the best preventative measure is the proper use of the condom.
The need for the program was brought into focus by the record number of VD cases last year.
By the late 70s, people are paying more attention to the darker sides of sexuality, and that gets expressed in the culture.
In 1980, Brian De Palma makes Dress to Kill, in which Angie Dickinson has casual sex, what Erica Jong would have called the zipless F, and bad things happen.
A film like that sent a pretty clear message that if a woman goes looking for sex, there's going to be a price to pay. That was part of a shift in the ethos of the culture.
That was the beginning of a whole trend in cinema that would really begin to explore the dark side of the sexual revolution. Films like Cruising, which is set in the gay underworld, Looking for Mr. Goodbar. This story showed you what would happen if you found Mr. Wrong instead of Mr. Right. If you look at the course of these films, you can almost see the anxieties that the sexual revolution is creating mirrored in these filmmakers' presentations.
In the early 80s, people were pretty anxious about sex. There was a plague that people were terrified about, and that was herpes.
Oh, tainted love. Tainted love.
The big H used to be heroin. Now the big H is herpes.
It's a virus, but it goes away, but it comes back, and it's not really curable.
The media was always along for the ride of the sexual revolution, and they had been reporting the story of sexual freedom for a long time. And this was a new story for them, the story of sexual anxiety.
Well, socially, I think people are probably a lot more cautious when they hear that there's some sort of an epidemic.
Sometimes I feel I've got to run away.
As horrible as it seemed, in fact, it was not the end of their lives. Of course, they could never have conceived that the sexual revolution would actually encompass its own Holocaust. And that, of course, was right around the corner.
The lifestyle of some male homosexuals has triggered an epidemic of a rare form of cancer.
A number of gay men start coming down what they call gay cancer, where they get these opportunistic infectious diseases.
Many victims get a rare form of cancer called Kaposi's sarcoma. Others get an infection known as pneumocystis pneumonia.
It was referred to as the gay pneumonia because gay people were catching it, and nobody knew what it was, but it seemed to have symptoms like pneumonia.
Suddenly, like leprosy broke out. I had to wear like spacesuits to go visit people in the hospital. It was really frightening because nobody knew what it was, and you thought you were going to die.
I'm very scared that I will come down with the Kaposi's at some point.
The moment that any kind of slight abrasion occurred, I rushed to the doctor.
I had noticed these bumps on my skin. It didn't hurt, but they were multiplying.
They're getting skin lesions, and no one knows what this is. They first come up with the name GRID. As the 80s progress, what GRID becomes known as is AIDS.
AIDS, AIDS, Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome.
AIDS has no cure.
They don't even give me a 1% chance.
There was an undernote of hysteria about it. This could affect you. We have no idea how it's transmitted.
And at the present rate of progress, there are 10 times as many men with AIDS every 2 years.
It's definitely transmissible. Just how, I don't know. Is it through blood? Is it through saliva? Is it through, I don't know.
Nobody knew. Toilet seat? Maybe. You know, that was the joke we used to have is, can you get AIDS from a toilet seat? Only if there's another guy sitting on it already.
There was endless talk about that put across the notion that AIDS is much easier to get than it is. People were embracing the worst kind of superstitious nonsense.
I understand that there are certain ways you can kiss and not be exposed, and certain ways you kiss and definitely be exposed to it.
The information related to AIDS was not forthcoming in the mass media.
Avoid interaction with people who might be getting it, which meant any gay people who you knew. That was the inference, and gay people were being made to feel like pariahs.
It also fed in a very perverse way into this whole right-wing mentality that, they'd brought it on themselves.
We do reap it in our flesh when we violate the laws of God.
It was very easy to portray this as a kind of punishment brought on by promiscuity.
We had lived through a time where our sexuality was a pure and innocent and liberating thing, and then we were being told that that was a wickedness that was now killing us.
I think it says something about homosexuality, that it's wrong, that, God ordained a monogamous relationship and we're not having these problems, and I think it's wrong. Even though it doesn't cause it, it's wrong, and there's no way of getting around that.
People who were dying were being told on their deathbeds that they were morally evil.
Now let me understand your point. You really think God is kind of punishing you?
Yes.
It was not an illness. It was being determined to be a judgment. It was a harrowing time. And then it almost became a cemetery of memories.
Of the 10 most important people in my life, 9 died of AIDS. My whole generation was wiped out by the AIDS epidemic.
There was anger about not getting any help from the government. Reagan was a Johnny-come-lately on that.
Maybe we put too much importance on it, but we did feel that if the President of the United States actually said this terrible thing is happening and we should try to do something about it, that it might make a difference, and he didn't.
His silence seemed complicit with the religious moral condemnation of homosexuality.
When Rock Hudson came down with it, that was the turning point.
Mr. Hudson is being evaluated and treated for complications of acquired immune deficiency syndrome.
No one ever suspected in the American public that Rock Hudson was even gay. The Rock Hudson who had played the big, strong Texan and giant opposite Elizabeth Taylor, gay? Impossible.
For the first time, People magazine did a really civilized profile of a gay celebrity, and the rest of the press followed suit, and they understood that they were not to sensationalize the story.
It brought home to mainstream America how shattering it was to see someone suddenly be in this situation with this disease. Rock Hudson, one of the great male icons of the Hollywood of Ron and Nancy Reagan, that got their attention.
Elizabeth Taylor joined the fight, and everybody takes her calls. I mean, even the Pope will talk to her, if only about jewelry. He'll answer her call.
I don't want Americans to think AIDS simply affects only certain groups. AIDS affects all of us.
It took until 1987 for Reagan to even mention AIDS in public. And by that time, over 25,000 people were already dead of it. And that was only the beginning.
At dawn today, a quilt made by Americans across the country was unfurled. Each of the 2,000 panels bears the name of an AIDS victim.
The AIDS quilt was a watershed in how America would have to really come to grips with it.
Years ago, we really didn't have to think about anything like this, but now we do.
We began to think of gays the way we would think of ourselves, our loved ones, our family. When you see signposts like Rock Hudson dying, you say, my God, we always thought he was one of us, but he was one of you. But really, we're all together.
I'm sure Mr. Reagan has not sent a letter saying this should not be happening in this country. I'm sorry, I'm supporting you. I'm sure he hasn't done that. I'm sure none of the congressmen or senators here have done that, and I want them to.
And the whole Hollywood entertainment industry got behind it.
I'm sick of seeing my friends die. It's a ridiculous idea that we can't get any federal money.
The whole reaction changed. It, turned around.
The quilt was really only the beginning of America's dialogue of sanity and compassion and awareness.
It's becoming increasingly clear that AIDS can be transmitted heterosexually. Many single people are now spending more time in health clubs than bars and discos.
It's a time where you really need to find someone to get serious with.
It just was the most extraordinary difference to the 60s, where promiscuous sex was part of this idealistic notion, to the fact that, you could die from it.
You were not just having sex with that person, you were having sex with their entire sexual resume.
It definitely reduced the number of partners in my life. No question.
Tonight, the city closed Plato's Retreat, that notorious heterosexual sex club on Manhattan's West Side.
This after city inspectors went in to look for so-called dangerous sexual activities that contribute to AIDS.
Plato's Retreat is more than just a club. It's an institution, it's a monument to sexual freedom, and they set us back 50 years.
By 86, 87, the sexual revolution turns sour and dark. The moral majority is gathering momentum to push its agenda through the Reagan administration. The government begins investigating pornography.
I want to announce that the Attorney General is setting up a new national commission to study the effects of pornography on our society.
After a year of hearings and surveying the sex scene, including a Houston peep show, the 11-member commission concluded that substantial exposure to sexually violent materials bears a causal relationship to sexual violence.
The Meese Commission was something that was simply a payback for the Christian right.
After hearing testimony critical of Playboy and Penthouse magazines, the commission sent letters to some businesses selling them, saying they'd been branded as porn.
If magazines, like movies, were rated, Playboy would wind up being somewhere between an R and a GP.
Shortly after, 7-Eleven stores pulled the magazines from their shelves.
It was allegedly an exploration of pornography. It wasn't really that at all. It was just a cross-country witch hunt.
The commission members, like others who've tried, could not define pornography and, like others, simply said they knew it when they saw it.
Porn is like this. People in the United States will masturbate it with one hand and push it away with the other. And that's the way it's always been.
The entire mood of the country had swung into anxiety, into fear, and this movie comes along and just completely captures the mood. This lawyer played by Michael Douglas, who's a happily married man, nonetheless goes for this incredibly explosive sexual encounter. that turns into this woman stalking him who eventually threatens his entire family.
What?
That movie elevates family values in the end. You know, it uses the sexual revolution to create this amazing ride of a thriller. It shows you the ways in which it can be a nightmare, and then it vaunts traditional values as the bulwark against those dangers. There are things like that that happen around the time that you can point to and say, the sexual revolution is clearly over.
People are a little afraid. That's right. That's why everyone's wearing rubber gloves. You go to your dentist, he comes to the door dressed in a wetsuit going, welcome. That's right. You meet someone special, you say, gosh, Helen, I care about you, but can I have some blood and urine so I can run some tests?
With an estimated 1 million Americans exposed to the AIDS virus, no one can afford to take any chances.
There was no such thing as safe sex. We had to kind of invent what safe sex was.
The best protection against the infection right now, barring abstinence, is the use of a condom.
And sex just isn't cool without condoms for protection.
Use a condom to help protect yourself.
Use a condom. Use a condom and don't have sex with anybody who shoots drugs.
Condom sales just went through the roof.
If you're gonna do it, you might as well be protected.
There were more and different kinds of brands. And you start to see condom ads in places that you never had before.
If you do have sex, use a condom. It may be the most important thing you ever do.
That was the end of the random sexual fantasy part of the sexual revolution.
Today, sex can kill you. You see, there's this disease, it's called AIDS.
We usually think of AIDS as the official end of the sexual revolution because for a discrete period of time in American history, sex had been freed from serious repercussions.
I'm still not completely satisfied, though.
But I think it's really important to take a more nuanced and more balanced and wider view.
The AIDS epidemic didn't end the sexual revolution. It just required that the sexual revolution take different forms.
There was no way the sexual revolution could be ended. Once that cat's out of the bag, it's out.
Get your freak on.
If you look at where we've come from the time of Kinsey, it's just staggering, the changes.
Father, Mother, this is Pete.
You're giving me fever. It wasn't a question of not having sex. It was a question of not talking about it publicly, not having it in books, not having it on TV.
Porn then was like this dirty thing that people masturbated to in the privacy of their garage, as opposed to what it is now, which is like the inspiration for most of pop culture and certainly 99% of reality television.
A lot of what the sexual revolution was about was saying, look, we all do these things. What's wrong with doing these things and saying that we do it?
Everybody's got the fever. That is something you all know.
The sexual revolution changed laws, it changed people's attitudes, it changed people's behavior.
The real change was among women. They began to have a lot more opportunities for socio-sexual experiences.
You give me fever.
We're in a post-feminist era in which a new generation of women has grown up in which they're much more comfortable with their own sexuality.
The bad news is all this emphasis has been put on women looking as much as possible like a porn star with implanted breasts. At the same time, it's so easy to forget that my mother couldn't get a checking account without a signature from her husband or father.
We who've lived through it all know that the changes have been amazing.
In the 50s, you could look down your secretary's blouse, and there was nothing she could do about it. Imagine where we were then.
There wasn't any term like battered women. There wasn't any term like sexual harassment. It was just normal life. That was it.
You give me fever.
I think the sexual revolution was a wonderful thing in this country. I think it helped a lot of people have more open lives and much fuller lives.
Oh, yeah.
For gay people in this country, life is fundamentally different than it once was.
You've got to remember that homosexuality was defined as being a mental illness.
There was every reason to remain in the closet. You could get beat up, you could get incarcerated.
Things changed, incredibly tumultuously.
I feel as if my life has had a purpose, and that's what I try to convey to other people about coming out.
We definitely made progress in terms of gay and lesbians on television. The L Word particularly, it couldn't have happened if a lot of other shows hadn't come before to kind of break ground.
And then you have a movie like Brokeback Mountain.
That was probably the first time a movie dealing so integrally with homosexuality was seen by that many people and celebrated. That's the breakthrough.
There's a lot more freedom now, but there are a lot of people that want to take that freedom away.
Some issues are never going to go away. You can't talk about them without igniting passion and anger and ideology.
We're to prevent the meaning of marriage from being changed forever. Our nation must enact a constitutional amendment to protect marriage in America.
Under 30% of the American public now live in a male-female heterosexual marriage relationship with children. The consequences of that have been a societal fallout that continues to affect us to this day.
America remains a very Puritan people.
Jesus is Lord!
So that we are fascinated with sexuality and still feel that shame and guilt. So in a certain sense, we've come a long ways and yet we haven't.
Stay on the scene like a sex machine.
It's like there's this pendulum of freedom and repression, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
We've seen what it's like to be in fear and shame about sexuality. And we've also seen what it means to live in a society of permissiveness to the point where it becomes numbing. How do we find the balances? And that's something that every generation will have to ask itself, because we live in a society of freedom. And as long as we are privileged to live in that society, the issues of sexuality will be in flux.
Hey, we're gonna make